Hi everyone, my name's Kevin Mack and this is Well Documented Nerd. I wanted to reach out here to put together some videos to help, mainly started this to help my players looking at D&D Beyond and understanding how to use it, and also helping new players with how to understand certain rules. So hope you enjoy this. Today's topic, as it says here on the right, is we're talking about ability scores. So this is a short video to discuss what ability scores are and what they actually mean in the game and where to find them. So let's start with what ability scores are. Ability scores in D&D are these 6 attributes that basically define your character in different areas. And those 6 attributes are strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. And these are each basically key elements of how your character is built. And you also essentially roll for these. Some people use standard arrays, etc. But the main way according to the rules they describe getting them is these scores decide what your character's strengths and weaknesses are. So the idea being you can't have perfect at everything. Nobody's perfect at everything. But this enables you to define sort of how your character works. So with that being said, let's shift over and look at what these are, and then we'll talk through all the details. So if I jump over here, what you're looking at right now is actually D&D Beyond. And this is a character I'm using in a campaign my wife is running. So if we look at this and where these actually come to pass, what you'll see here, we're going to zoom in right here to just our one bullet point. Where can I find? These are my ability scores: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. So what do each of these mean at the end of the day? Well, strength is essentially one of the ones most people get, in the sense that it's how strong your character is. So what does this actually impact? Well, your strength is any ability that involves athletics or physical exertion. So that includes hitting with a melee weapon. So if you're swinging a sword, your strength will affect your ability to hit and your ability for damage, how much damage you can do. The next one on this is dexterity. Dexterity is mainly your agility, your ability to move, your speed. This is all affected by dex, so how dexterous your character is. A high dexterity means that you're going to be harder for people to hit. You're going to be good at anything that requires agility. It also means that when it comes to range weapons like a bow or a crossbow, your fine motor skills are better and you're able to hit a target better. So a higher dexterity means you're going to be better with a bow or a crossbow. Or in the case of a wizard or a sorcerer, it could also impact your ability to do ranged spell attacks. So if I want to aim that firebolt at a target, this is my friend. Next up on the list is Constitution. Constitution is essentially how well your character is able to take a hit or how tough they are. Their physical toughness. So if you think about this in terms, the one argument I always heard from a player way back when was, yeah, but how is this different than strength? And the answer is, you ever heard of a boxer that has a glass jaw? That's essentially high strength, low constitution. So constitution in-game directly correlates to your hit points. So a low constitution means that you'll have a lower hit point because it's a modifier that gets attached to your hit points. Intelligence. This is how smart and analytical you are. Intellectual, analytical. I combine those two. Isn't that great? Intelligence determines how good you are at problem solving, analytical thinking, that type of thing. This is important for classes like wizards, in the sense where they draw their magic from intelligence. Same with, in this character, a artificer. Then we have wisdom. Wisdom is more your common sense and your ability to perceive the world around you. How much do you really understand the world around you, and how much are you able to interpret that and use that to your ability? The example I always use here of a difference between an intelligence and wisdom is if you look at Dalai Lama is the great example, right? Is able to say something that seems so obvious once he said it, but nobody thinks about it. That's wisdom versus intelligence. And then finally, there's charisma. Now, you'll hear lots of people online say charisma is just direct physical beauty. And that's actually not true. Charisma is your natural charisma. How much are you able to relate to people and people like you? That is a key element of how you work as a character when you do social interactions. So charisma fits into that. Now, charisma also ties directly to your spellcasting ability if you're a sorcerer. So there are spellcasting abilities that attach to all three of these depending on classes, worth mentioning. Intelligence and wizards and artificers are intelligence. Your clerics and your paladins are going to fall in wisdom. Your sorcerers are going to fall in charisma. Okay? Now, these scores, you'll notice here are my scores: 15, 16, 16, 18, 11, 14. I rolled pretty well, actually, for this character. But it's worth, notice these +2, +3s, +4s, +0, +2. What are these? These are the modifiers. So depending on the range of scores is 3 to 18. Depending on what you get there, you get a modifier attached. That modifier is what actually affects everything. So if we look at the actual rules in D&D, what you'll see here is there's a table that determines what your modifier is. Now, 10 or 11 is considered average. So if you're within that range of a 10 or 11, you get a +0 modifier because there's nothing about you physically that's holding you back. There's nothing that's giving you a bonus, all right? But if you had a strength of 14, that gets you a +2. Okay? That translates to saving throws, that translates to skill checks, that translates to a bunch of different things. But these are essentially where the modifiers come from. Now, DnDBeyond does this calculation for you, and when I put in 18, it said I got a +4. Now, what you'll notice here is that, like, if I look at saving throws, there is no magic here that this matches this. Strength +2. Now, my personal, between my race and my class, I have proficiency in 2 saving throws: intelligence and constitution, which is why you see an additional +2, which is my proficiency bonus, that basically applies to each of these. So I had a +4 intelligence, I had a +2 proficiency bonus. There it is. You can tell which I'm proficient in by these black circles that if I hover over it, say proficiency. But let's talk about how this relates to your character ultimately. This relates to things like your skills. If I look over here, you'll see that for every skill, down here's my skills block. If you notice on my skills list, every skill that's listed here has a mod next to it. This identifies what it's connected to. Like, for example, Arcana, understanding of magic forces and how they work, is keyed off my intelligence. And I chose this as a skill I'm proficient in, which means that my Arcana bonus is my intelligence plus a proficiency, +6. Athletics. So my general athletics, you tell me to sprint or lift something or run or do some form of athletics check. It's keyed off of strength. I have a +2. This is not magic how these numbers were calculated. It's just these modifiers and a proficiency bonus where applicable. Things like wisdom for nature or for medicine. Understanding the human body, understanding what you're looking at, knowing how to treat it is a very wisdom-based skill. But you'll see things like performance or persuasion. These are charisma social skills. They're off charisma. Now, what are the 2 most common skills you hear a lot, I hear the most in every D&D campaign, are perception and insight. Perception is my ability to notice something around me. Like, do I notice the people moving in for the ambush? Do I notice that loose floorboard when I walk in? The insight is my ability to guess at the motives of somebody. So, like, when you're talking to somebody, do I really believe this guy? Do I really believe this lady? That type of thing. Now, these also are keyed off of here to your passives. So I want to take a sec to talk about this senses block here as part of this ability score. But essentially, this block that you're looking at decides your passive perception, passive investigation, and passive insight. And this is mainly for your DM to use, but it essentially says, if you don't ask me to roll, if I'm just walking into a room, my passive perception's 10. So when a DM sets a threshold and says it takes a 14 to notice this, it means if I don't actually ask for a roll, he or she should assume I got a 10. Passive intelligence or investigation, if I'm sort of looking for things and they don't want to make me roll, the DM should treat it as a 16 and say, all right, if it was a 14 to find it, Kevin found it. Same with insight. So if I'm talking to somebody, like let's say I as a player am talking to a barkeep, and that barkeep is secretly planning to sell me out to somebody, and I'm just talking to them. I as the DM can say, oh, well, this player has a passive insight of 16, so I may call out to the player, hey, you notice this guy's a little shifty. Right? So that's how these scores impact this type of gameplay. The other thing worth mentioning that they impact is actually over here. So as I mentioned before, I said that these scores impact your ability to hit things. So whether it's strength or dexterity. Now, in the case, you can see this in terms of the fact that I have chosen weapons I'm proficient with. So by default, I have chosen things like my unarmed strike has a +4, which is this plus this. My range attack has a +5. That's my dexterity plus my proficiency bonus, +5. You'll also, though, notice things like dagger. My damage is a +3. So this is a +1 dagger, ultimately. But I have an additional proficiency here because of the fact of how my character is built. But you notice here that all of these correlate back to individual items. So like, for example, quarterstaff, +4. I have a +4 with a 5-foot reach for a quarterstaff. So +4 is strength plus proficiency bonus. You'll notice my quarterstaff deals 1d6 +2 for strength. So that's how these scores matter. You'll also notice that my hit points are calculated based on the fact that I have a D8 as a hit die +3. And being first level, I get the maximum. So I got an 8 +3, 11. That's how my character gets to his hit points. So I hope this has been helpful. I'm going to do more of these, but this was a short recording to just go over the basics of ability scores. Thanks, and may the dice come up in your favor.